Okay, I'm going to call to order the Planning Commission meeting on August 20th, 2019 at 7 o'clock. First up is approval of minutes from July 16th. Any changes?
I'll move approval.
All right, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? All right, minutes are approved. Public appearances for non-agenda items. I don't have anything up here. I know some people have thrown out sheets, but I'm guessing they're for agenda items. But if anyone wants to speak on non-agenda items, let me know real quick. All right, then we are going to move on. Next up, number 4 is agenda review. Just one slight change on both H and I on the agenda. I'm going to move to amend the title. It says VH Acquisitions LLC is the who the agent is for on both H and I. It's actually technically Fitchburg Campus 2 LLC. And so I'm going to move to amend H and I to change VH Acquisitions to Fitchburg Campus 2 LLC. If someone would second that. Second. All in favor of that change, say aye.
Aye.
Any other changes to the agenda at all? All right, then I don't think we approved the agenda, do we? That's just a council thing. Yeah. All right, then we can move right along to agenda item A. And first up is a certified survey extraterritorial jurisdiction request. And I don't know if Durfers or someone for the Durfers is here. Oh, okay, you want to come up and, you know, if you want to just tell us quick what's going on, or staff can help you out too.
Yeah, they're looking to, I'm Steve Four, and they're looking to split off that 9-acre parcel. Right there off Grandview Road. It was passed last week by Verona to split it off the original farm. The Dorfers have been on Wayland Road for, ever, before Fitchburg and Verona was here.
Durferville.
Durferville, 112 years, right there. But anyways, they're gonna take that farm and they wanna split that piece off there.
Okay. Good. Sonia, do you have anything that you want to add?
Sure. So this is, as the applicant noted, located in the town of Verona. This is in the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction. So we do exercise plat review in that area. And it's essentially a farm consolidation lot, creating a new separate parcel around the existing buildings. Staff's recommendation is for approval with the 2 standard conditions as written.
Okay. Any questions, comments at all? Someone want to make a motion?
I'll move approval with the conditions as noted.
All right, seconded by Stephen. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? All right, that's approved. Thank you for coming in.
Welcome on being the new mayor as well.
Thank you. All right, next up is B, the certified survey map request by William Camperlino. And I do have Chris Adams here, I believe, representing Bill. Hello, you want to tell us about what's going on?
Bill is looking to divide the parcel that he currently has a home on and create a vacant lot that he would be able to sell. He's actually moving out of state, so he's planning on selling the home and the lot. This is the new version. We had a different version that went to Lacey and then realized with the help of staff that it didn't have access to Lacey, so we modified it so they have this version, but it needs a conditional use, which we've applied for as well.
All right, you want to add, Sonia?
Yep, this is pretty standard lot division, summarized well by the applicant. I'll just explain the conditional use permit requirement a little bit further. So by creating this common lot line between proposed lot 1 and lot 2, it would make the setback on this screened-in porch area non-conforming. So the required rear yard setback here is 35 feet. That can be reduced down to as low as 25 feet, but it needs to be approved by a conditional use permit by the Plan Commission. So that hasn't been done yet. We just included a condition on approval of the CSM that the CUP be approved prior to signing off on this CSM. And that application has been submitted. We expect to see it next month.
All right. Questions, comments?
How do the neighbors feel about this?
We're sad to see Bill and Chris leave the neighborhood. I live on McGaw Road, for everyone who doesn't know. Anything else? Want to make a motion?
I move to approve CS 2305-19 with the 6 conditions listed by staff.
Here,
Second.
seconded by Ed. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. All right, that is approved.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up, C, public hearing and consideration of rezone request RZ 2309-19. And I believe that we have the applicant first present, and then we do the public hearing, if I remember the process right. So I have a sheet up here, but if, I think Dan is here. Yeah, if you want to come up and, yeah, that's all right. You can do that afterwards. Tell us what you're doing here, and then we'll do the public hearing real quick. And I don't think anyone's here for that, actually, but we'll have questions and comments and all that fun stuff after that.
I think I forgot to fill my sheet out each time, so at least I'm consistent here.
That's all right.
So this is the continuation of what we presented in June for the site along Verona Frontage Road, where the old Nedrebo's formal wear tuxedo and wedding dress rental store was. So we'll be building an indoor multi-story self-storage building, and this is the SIP portion of that application, and then the architectural review of the materials proposed for the building. And what we've got is a mix of exterior materials that have glass, some masonry, and then architectural metal panel on different faces and sides of the building. Where we have the placeholders indicated are signage locations where we didn't have the exact layout and the colors or size of the lettering yet, but where we wanted to indicate in accordance with the ordinances that we would be putting the signage oriented towards the west, towards the new highway. So the building, the site has some existing elevation to it, so it uses the existing elevation such that you can, on that page that your mouse is on, works with the existing topography of the site so that the loading can take place at the high part of the site. And then also as well on the east side, away from traffic, there's an additional drive-through loading area so that if you're moving and it's the middle of the winter or it's raining, you can get your truck unloaded and your belongings in and out of the building in a covered area. Any other questions or specifics on the materials or the site or things we can answer?
I think I'll do a public hearing real quick and then open up to more questions. I don't have anything, so this won't take more than a few seconds here.
Okay.
So I'm going to open up the public hearing for C, the consideration rezone request RZ 2309-19. I don't have any slips up here, so I'll make sure no one wants to speak in the public. All right. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And now, do you want to go ahead, Sonia, and then we'll have questions and feedback.
We've seen this application a number of times. As a reminder, it's following the Plan Development District or PDD zoning, which is a negotiated or create your own zoning district when all of our standard zoning districts can't accommodate the project at the level of amenity or environmental design that's proposed. So they have already received their general implementation plan approval that's been signed and recorded at the council level, and they also were before us recently with a land division to divide this front portion where the building's proposed from the back, and then any remaining environmental contamination is located on that rear parcel and subject to continued DNR monitoring and enforcement cleanup. So again, this is the specific implementation plan or step 2 in that PDD process. And then they also have to receive architectural design review approval. The applications are essentially the same, and staff's recommendation is for approval. The SIP is included in the packet, and that has 11 conditions of approval, all pretty standard. And then the architectural design review is also recommended for approval, and that had 11 conditions recommended in the staff report. I'd like to add 2 more to address concerns from the Public Works Department, and these were included in the packet and the comment review, so things that you would have seen. We'd recommend adding condition number 12. The adjacent property owner shall provide a recorded affidavit allowing temporary grading on their property. So that's referring to the parcel I just described being located behind this one, and it just so happens that the current owner is also these applicants. But to allow the grading on that property, Public Works wanted to see an affidavit allowing that. And then number 13, the applicant shall address remaining water, sewer, and stormwater comments to the satisfaction of the Public Works Director prior to issuance of permits. There were just a few outstanding items in the comment review.
Yep, happy to do both of those things. And just, that's a good reminder. The subdivision process allows for the current owner to do the well monitoring that the DNR has probably for, this is a guess on my part, but 18 to 24 more months. So it enables the site to get back into productive use, and at such time that those well tests come back at the level that the DNR wants to see, then that's really the last step in closure according to their description of, I'm not an environmental engineer, but that's what the DNR's told the current landowners.
Questions up here, comments?
Just out of curiosity, which side, in reference to this map, which side is the contaminated part on? Is that behind that drive-through loading area?
It would be
Yeah, right there.
that way.
Okay.
Yep, to the east.
There we go.
Yep, so where it says turf, by the word existing in woodland, that's the area where they have some other monitoring wells that they're just, all the soil was removed and replaced with clean sand, and then a geomembrane was capped over it so that rainwater doesn't permeate through it. They just want to see the monitoring results from that area. They're in a declining path, but they want them to keep going.
Sure. I was more curious how, from the first time you came, I couldn't imagine how it was going to look. I think you had it was a taller building, if I remember
It
correctly.
was the first time around, yep.
This makes it a little more clear.
And it's a little tricky with the way, if you drive by it, the elevation of the site makes it kind of hard to visualize what
They're
it's.
always hard until
Yeah,
you see them on paper.
yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah, how does the biofilter work then? Is the membrane not under that portion?
Correct, yep.
Okay.
Where it says biofilter and then running straight south, that is the CSM that was recorded last time is for that irregular shaped parcel, and that's all clean and has an exemption letter from the DNR. Nothing ever, in simplistic terms, nothing ever really happened on that part of the site. So it's the right-hand part that they will convey at some future date, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions? Seeing none, if someone would like to do a motion on the consideration rezone request, that'd be great.
RZ 230919 with 11 conditions as stated by staff?
There's actually 13 conditions.
Or was that with 3
We
conditions?
added 2 that Sonia mentioned.
13 in the ADR.
Oh, okay. So it's 11 for this one. All right.
Said it right?
Yep, you got it. Yep, sorry.
I was counting.
All right, and we got a second from, I'm sorry, Rich, okay, good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, then next is the ADR for the same site. I'm guessing all the same things you just talked about. Is there anything you want to
Pretty
add?
much, it may be just a question to be sure we come out of here with it, knowing what we can and can't do. The masonry samples are from County Concrete out toward Verona. If it's approved as is, that's great, but if we want to alter a color or change aesthetic things, is that doable, or how exactly
Are you
does
gonna make it hot pink? No. Sonia, you could probably answer that best.
The zoning code allows the zoning administrator to grant minor
use discretion on
minor
that?
approvals
Okay.
if they're consistent with what the plan commission authorized.
We like it the way it is, but sometimes a 3x3 square, then when you change your mind down the road, kind of. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure staff will take care of that as long as it's minor and it's not
Yep.
turning it to yellow or hot pink or something like that.
Yep, okay.
All right, any further questions on the ADR at all? I just have one on the black, I don't know what it is, on the top left. It looks like there might be etching around the sides. Is that just on the sample? That's not on the building? Okay,
The way it was cut, yeah.
okay.
And that's basically the
Glass.
glass where
Oh.
the storefront windows are.
Okay, I didn't know if there was meant to be some kind of,
They put something on the edge of it once they cut it, so it doesn't hurt you when you're trying to carry it around.
okay.
I move to approve ADR 5237 with the 13 conditions.
Second.
Second by Rich again, I think. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. All right, that is approved as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate your help.
All right, next up is E, public hearing and consideration of ordinance 2019-0-25. Are you handling this? Okay.
This is a proposed ordinance amendment to the Smart Code, which is Chapter 23, regarding frontage build-out requirement. So this is one of the critical components in Smart Code that creates the urban form and the relationship of the building to the street. And that's requiring a certain portion of the building to take up the width of the lot. So if you have a 100-foot wide lot and you're in the T5 or the 5th transect, you would need to hit 80% frontage build-out, or your building would need to be at least 80 feet along that 100-foot lot width. So that's one of the critical components of Smart Code. It does allow you to vary beyond that setback line or that primary frontage by 18 inches. This ordinance amendment would change that to 36 inches, but only for the SD2 special district. This would be approved by the Plan Commission. Other architectural design reviews in Transect 5, for example, are approved by staff, but SD2 always comes to the Plan Commission. SD2 was created specifically for Phoenix and for industrial and manufacturing uses. So we felt comfortable bringing this amendment forward because industrial buildings typically have a longer mass, taller building height, and might require more of a building recess to break up that big facade. So that's what this does.
All right. Any questions at all? Yeah,
I'm going to recuse on items E and F.
okay, great. Any other questions, comments?
So this, you said that this is for S2, that was made specifically for Phoenix, but it could be used again then anywhere that we have Smart Code?
Only in the Special District 2, and right now the only special district that we have, SD2, is for this property.
If there was, would we just probably do new districts for other people that might come in elsewhere and?
It's possible. Again, SD2 was created very specifically for Phoenix. It describes their operation in detail.
So,
Zach, yeah?
just to confirm, basically, we're just saying they can be back like another 1.5 feet.
Yep, and it's a building recess, so the part of the facade is still at that primary setback line, and then it just allows part of the face to be recessed beyond that, up to 36 inches or 3 feet.
So it's really trying to add a little more visual interest, so it's not just wall as you
Yeah,
drive
sure.
down. All right. Yeah, Tom?
I understand it was for Phoenix, I get that. Do you feel it's going to be a burden to others, though? Or not really? Do you feel, once you say yes and it goes into Smart Code, then others have to apply by it? My point is, Phoenix is an animal of its own, and do you feel this is going to be a burden to others? I'm questioning that. Or not really?
No, I don't.
Or have you run into a problem?
Right, one, because this really will only apply to this property, Special District 2, and second, if anything, it definitely grants more flexibility to the development by allowing up to 36 rather than 18 inches, so I wouldn't think it would be a burden.
Okay. Gotcha.
Other questions at all? I also need to do the public hearing portion of this. I should have done that after Lenny gave her presentation on this. So I will open the public hearing. I don't have anything from the public on this one. Just give people a chance. All right, now I'll close the public hearing for that. Further questions, concerns on this ordinance at all? Otherwise, someone can do a motion.
I'll move approval of ordinance 2019-0-25.
Second.
All right, second by Steve, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstain?
Abstain?
All right, as abstain. All right, moving right along to F, the ADR for Phoenix headquarters. I've got a number of people here from various groups. If you want to come up, and we have David and Paul and Dietmar and Ron. Come on up and
Nothing beats some corrugated aluminum.
all right, welcome.
Good evening, guys. Are we good to go?
Yeah, yep.
My name's Ron Locast. I'm with Potter Lawson Architects. Doug could not be here tonight, so I'm representing Potter Lawson in Phoenix. We were here about a year ago with Phase 1 for Phoenix, so we'll kind of go through that. Here's actually an aerial map showing the site itself. Just to orient you, Highway 14, North Madison this direction, but you can see Lacey Road, East Sherrill Parkway. The site is located just south of that intersection. When we were here last year, we had approved a 10,000 square foot imaging facility pretty much in that location. And so tonight, what we're here for is to discuss their corporate offices facility, which is about a 48,000 square facility, which will be sitting in this location right here. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is just a site plan. It's been rotated a little bit, but just so you can tell, orientation, that's Lacey Road. That intersection I was talking about was further north in this direction, south being here. The Phase 1 building that we were here with last year sat in this location adjacent to the wetlands. The new facility that we're being proposed tonight is about a 48,000 square foot building sitting right there. It's a single-story building. About 14,000 square feet of it is office space. The other 34,000 square feet is a production space. All right. Primary entrances into the site. There's one driveway that exists here with the Phase 1 development. We're proposing a second shared drive along this side, along the north side of the property to enter the site. That's probably the primary entrance in regard to vehicles and people coming to the facility. Will be along that side. The primary public entrance into the facility is located here. There is a staff entrance located at this position here. The parking's been designed and laid out in such a way that the majority of the parking sits behind the building, kind of screened by the building off of Lacey Road. There is some parking here, of which a portion of this is visitor parking. And you'll see in the landscape plan, that's actually got some screening happening at that location there, again, to help screen that parking, not make it quite so visible. Another component on the site is the loading dock, which is currently located in this position here. There's 2 bays at that location. The facility right now, as I said, is 48,000. One of the reasons it's positioned in this location is they've got the ability to add on approximately a 60,000 square foot addition in the future. The parking itself is about 120 stalls with the ability to add 28 additional stalls in this location once expansion occurs. Trash and recycling, I'm just kind of walking through different elements. Trash and recycling on site is located here. It's an enclosure. Those vehicles would come in this way, load, and head out this way, while trucks entering the loading dock area actually come in through this point, back in, and then leave out that way. Again, it's kept fairly a distance away from Lacey Road as much as possible, keeping it on the east side of the site. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go real heavy into the landscape. I think you guys have all seen the packet and everything, but just a few comments here. All the street trees along the front are to remain. We're actually proposing to add a couple more that were removed based on where the drive locations and everything are, just to maintain that street frontage. This hatched area that you're seeing here and around here, we're proposing a prairie grass along those faces with some mowed areas so that there's breakout activity space for the staff to go out into. One of the things I wanted to mention here, actually I was going to do it in the other slide, but that's okay. The frontage issue was discussed. Right now, this building takes up about 30% of the frontage. They're required to have 60%. One of the intents on this design was to introduce berms wrapping around here and landscaping on that to help accommodate that screening. With those berms, we're up to about 54%. It's our understanding that Phoenix has up to 8 years to comply with the 60%. So that's something that they will move forward with as time goes on. Other landscaping elements, you can see it's fairly heavily treed. I won't get into all the species and everything tonight. Again, you have that with a fair amount of landscaping and screening up and around the entry to help identify that location. The other comment that was brought up, that Sonia had brought up with the 3 foot, and I'll show that in the massing in a little bit here so that you can see that. But right now the building, we're allowed a 0 to 24 foot front yard setback. The building, this front face right there is located 16.5 feet off that property line, and it steps back 3 feet at that location to 19.5 feet. So the whole building is still within that 24-foot setback. We had requested the change from from 18 inches to 36 inches, just due to the size of the building and the massing and how the building stepped, and we'll show you that in a second. Next slide, please. You can go on to the next slide, actually. Real quickly, I don't want to get into the floor plan too much, but it does kind of drive where these entrances and things were located. So this is actually the floor plan of the building. It's a little light, I apologize for that. The main public entry that you saw off the parking was here, Lacey Road across the front there. Primary public entrance, this is that staff entrance in. One of the things that we wanted to do to kind of anchor this corner is introduce a fair amount of glazing around that edge and then create open office in that area so that, number one, the employees get the daylight and the ability, everybody gets daylight, especially by moving internally a lot of the offices and stuff. They have borrowed lights and such in that area. But also to give the ability for people to look in and see that the engineers working and stuff like that. So there's a bit of that transparency on site. So that's kind of why we established their work open office area towards Lacey Road. The other component here, which is the production area, I'll keep this kind of simple. One of the big reasons they wanted to move to this site was really to improve their efficiency and how they circulate and flow through the facility. So the intent here in the production area is the loading docks in this location, their flow of work basically works in a counterclockwise rotation and wraps around. So basically, product is brought in here, assembled here, moved to this area where those pieces are assembled together. There's a large crane overhead over this whole section right here, takes those elements into the bunkers along this side where the product is tested. From there, it's either disassembled and stored here or brought down by forklift to the truck and then brought back out of the facility. So again, it's just a very smooth process wrapping around. Next slide. So from an exterior standpoint, one of the things that was put to us as a test was that Phoenix wanted to create their own image. They wanted to make sure it stood out a little bit from the neighborhood, but it had to really work with the neighborhood. So the use of materials was very important. If you recall, some of the buildings out in that area, there's an apartment building with black or charcoal colored brick. The buildings right across the way are a little more neutral, a little more earthy in materials with browns, wood, exposed wood, and things like that. So we wanted to try the exterior to tie in from a material use, but still have its own identity. So what you're seeing in this image here, this is the one-story office component. That's about a 16-foot height. The production area up towards Lacey Road, which is here, that's about a 39-foot height at that location. And again, that's due to functionality, getting the crane to work, getting product in and out of the bunkers and such. But from a material use standpoint, masonry, the black masonry, You can see here, it's kind of a charcoal gray. That's basically wrapping around this area, and we also do wrap it around the other building. One of the things is with the two different functions happening here, we want the materials to try to tie the building all together, create it as one building. The other material, which you see in the brown here and here, actually, if you go to the next slide, you might actually see it's a little more of an eye view, it's a little closer up. This material here and here, again, playing off some of the more natural wood materials across the way and such, it's actually an aluminum tube section laminated with a nice wood material. So it plays off nicely with what's going on across the street, has a nice color. It actually has a lot of depth. It's actually a tube section. These are stacked. You get a reveal between them, so you get a nice play with the light and shadow. Basically creates a rain screen there. The tube sections on this component here, a little smaller scale, they're basically this size here. The ones here are just a little bit larger. They're 5 inches by 1 inch deep. So again, it's that play off the different materials. The remainder of the building, there's a fair amount of different metal panel options. We can kind of go hold up the colors here, but this panel here and this panel here, they're basically a flat metal panel. I think you can see them down here, kind of darker colored one. Those are foam panels, kind of playing off of that. That is not the color. The actual color is actually a black at the signage piece, and then a champagne color. So it's those two colors working together with the brick. And that's that piece here, and this piece here is the champagne that wraps up and around the building. Kind of a little lighter, but kind of complement each other. The contrast. The signage, I will say, right now, those are placeholders. We will come back with the signage package down the line. But the intent is, Phoenix would like some sort of larger graphic along Lacey Road, and then a smaller scale signage at this point as you come up to the entry. So that will be worked out at a future date. Other materials, this metal panel here, if you recall on the floor plan, that's where the bunkers sat, where they test the product. Couldn't really have glass there, but what we did do is they don't go full height. They're up about 16 feet or so. We're wrapping a clear story window up and around, getting daylight into the employees. That was very important to them to have. It also, from an exterior standpoint, is kind of nice. It gives you a sense of layering. There's a crane going up there. They'd like to see that painted out a color, get that transparency in that layering, so that becomes actually a feature on the building. Next slide, please. I won't spend too much time on this one, but you can see the masonry wrapping around. Fair amount of windows. This is that whole open office area in that area. The glazing is basically just a low-E clear glass, very straightforward glass, but high-performance glass from an efficiency standpoint. And you can also see then the beginning of the entry piece here where the canopy kind of wraps down and around, and you have the ability for some sort of signage piece there. Just another aerial view as we wrap around the building. This component here, they've actually got a training center, training room, boardroom, break room, kind of breaks out into a patio space. Again, that's towards the east, towards the back side. And then this is just down low. Now, the landscaping isn't in there, but if you recall, there's fairly heavily landscaped through here and a lot of foundation planting along that side there. So that's going to be there. But we carry the brick materials. You're fine. Wrapping around. Then the other metal panels here, these two metal panels complement or actually very similar, if not the same, to the Phase 1 building to try to tie that all together with their colors. Next slide, please. And just a view down lower. This is the loading dock area where the brick kind of wraps up and around. We want more of a durable material at the loading docks, obviously, from a maintenance standpoint. And then it wraps around Lacey Road again, and you can see wrapping some of these materials around, emphasizing where those bunkers are. The glass would also wrap up and around. The masonry wraps up and around. So it really kind of creates a composition of materials to try to break down the larger mass. And the last slide, I believe. Oh, that's just down low. Again, the materials along Lacey. And then we're back to this for questions.
Right.
Can you point out the area of the 3-foot recess?
Yes, actually, if you go back one slide, that's a good point, Sonia. Go back right here. Right here at this location, that's that 3-foot setback. And you can see because of the size of the mass of this and that, we just felt it was important to get a little more depth there. We wanted to make sure that the building still maintain both those frontages are well within the 24-foot setback requirement. But that's where the 3 feet is, right there.
All right. Sonia, do you want to give a staff report?
Sure. This is in Smart Code, of course, in Special District 2, as we just identified. Typically, architectural design review for smart code is done administratively at the staff level. There are just a few instances where it does come before the Plan Commission, and special districts are one of those cases, so SD1 or SD2, and then also civic zones. For example, we reviewed the elementary school over in the Terra Vesta subdivision. So this is one of those cases. The staff report outlines that it meets all of the requirements. They're getting to their frontage build-out along the property line. They meet their maximum side yard setbacks, landscaping, bicycle parking, et cetera. And then the staff recommendation is for approval with 11 conditions as noted. And then just a clarification for the record, conditions number 4 and 5 are regarding stormwater. The Public Works Department did point out that there is an open erosion control stormwater permit for this site because they came in with phase 1. So those would be required if needed in the Public Works Director's opinion.
Questions, comments? Stephen?
I have just a question. I excuse me, I apologize if this was not part of this overall review, if this has already been taken care of, but I noticed that driveway, how much of a distance is there from that Sherrill roundabout to your main entry point onto the property? And again, if that's completely already been decided.
Maybe 2 to 3, what? Between 200 and 300 feet.
I was, guessing 200 to 300 feet maybe. Does that sound about right, Sonny?
Just tell from here how,
Go back a little more, Sonny.
especially if that's the main entry point, coming right off of a roundabout.
There you go.
So it looks like there's room for another site between this and the.
Oh, yes. I believe it's between 200 to 300 feet.
Okay.
Further questions, comments? Tom?
Are your mechanicals on top of the building?
Yes, if you go back to that aerial, the 3D might work the best. We are proposing a screen wall at that location where mechanicals will be sitting on top of that. We set them back from the edge as far as we could, and we would be screening those.
I'm pretty sure it's not a problem with the neighbors, probably because of the distance from the neighborhood, but has there been any thing to make this quieter, or so we don't have any problem with the neighbors?
Do you mark quietness as far as the equipment? It's standard equipment at this point. Standard HVAC.
Food for thought.
Noted, thank you.
Food for thought.
Yep.
You already told me a semi can go through, so I'm assuming fire can go through.
Yeah, actually, if you go back to the aerial, I should have mentioned that the site plan. I should bring that up, right there. Well, one more back, Sonia, I'm sorry. Right here, all the darker hatched area is designed to handle any sort of large vehicle, semis and fire trucks. We have met with the fire department in regard to fire lanes around the facility. And so Lacey Road is going to be allowed to be used as a fire lane, as well as this drive right through here wraps all the way around, so that there's full coverage around the whole facility. This distance in this phase here easily handles, their hose distance easily handles that side of the building, so they've got full coverage.
For this, you answered, I didn't mean to rush you. For this building, how many employees?
Right now, to open, I believe 70 to 80 employees.
Full build-out, or is there another phase?
Hopefully a lot as
right
they
now off
keep
the top of my
doing
head,
good
I'm
and keep
going-
growing.
Yeah, the intent is for the expansion, I don't want to necessarily speak for David, but
Roughly.
you could get another 40, additional 40-plus people, which is why the parking was designed for 120 plus potential 28 additional stalls at this location. The goal is not to have any on-street parking.
Got it. I'm just thinking about Lacey Road and traffic itself. Staff, look at traffic, I'm sure you did, in reference to adding more vehicles to the Lacey Road, which is already well-used.
I know the Public Works Department has been involved heavily in the design review for this and would be involved in any proposed improvements to Lacey or other public streets.
And noted.
Good question.
I just have one quick question. You didn't talk about it on here. Have you considered, are you thinking about doing any solar at all on the building? Maybe that's a future discussion. Just curious more than anything else.
Probably a future discussion, but at this time, no, it has not been considered.
Other questions? We want to move forward then with approval?
I make a motion to approve, this is the architectural design review, right? F?
Yep.
Yes.
Architectural design review for Phoenix headquarters with 11 conditions as noted by staff.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Rich. All right. Then all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? And
Abstain.
from Ed. All right. Thank you. I'm
Thank you
excited
very
to get this project started.
There you go. Thank you.
Oh, I gotta.
All right. Moving on to G, public hearing and consideration of ordinance 2019-0-26. So you want to take this one?
This is an ordinance amendment to Chapter 24 of the code, which is our land division ordinance. Approval of this ordinance would be required to allow the next two applications to move forward as proposed. So those next two applications are for the Viridian plat over in Stoner Prairie. State platting law requires lot widths be at least 50 feet wide and also have an area of 6,000 square feet or more. State platting law does allow those to be less if specifically exempted by the local ordinance. We already do that, for example, for smart code areas, Chapter 23, and I just did discuss this with the Department of Administration Plat Review Office out of curiosity about how other communities are handling these small lot subdivisions. They are becoming more common in the region, and they're often handled through a PDD process. So as we know, PDD, or Plan Development District, is negotiated, so all of those zoning dimensional standards are negotiated for the project itself, like height, setback, et cetera. So this is really no different. It's just also adding in that lot width and size of the lots. So if acceptable to the Plan Commission, this would allow smaller lot sizes and smaller lot widths under PDD zoning per the discretion of the Plan Commission. And then it does one other thing, and it changes the allowable radii for local streets from 100 feet of curvature to 70 feet, and that was reviewed by the Public Works Department. So if you have a radius that's smaller, 10, 15, 20 feet, your street is basically becoming a 90-degree intersection. So this is a little bit wider than that at 70 feet, and this was, again, approved by our transportation engineer and recommended to accommodate this project.
All right. First, I will open the public hearing on this. So the public hearing is open. I don't have any comments on this piece anyway. So seeing, oh, you want to come up? Yeah, can you come up to the microphone actually, please? Thank you. And just tell us your name quick.
I'm sorry, not planned. My name's Wes Marciel. I live in Fitchburg on Richardson Street. My question is, to be considered, is why is it good for the city to cram more lots and tiny streets and crowd? That's, why is it good?
Sure. You want me to answer that, or you want to answer that?
It might be something that the applicants could also touch on in their presentation, but generally speaking, this is a way that the developer is able to provide a more attainable or affordable single-family ownership type of housing unit, which for the city of Fitchburg, I don't remember the median housing price, but it's pretty high up there. So this is a way that we can start to reach our housing goals by reducing the overall cost of land and provide a single-family home at a lower price point.
I guess I would just also comment too that if everything that was coming to us was this small of lot size, that'd be a problem. But having a wide variety of options, I think, is really important. Part of that is so that things can be hopefully more affordable. And your definition of affordable is probably different than other people. But if new homes in other parts of the city are going for $425,000, $450,000, these are coming in under $300,000. That's pretty significant. And that's kind of one of those trade-offs to that. So, I think, part of it for some people would be also that the more development you can have on a smaller piece of land, then the more tax base you can get on an acre of land if you have, 5 houses instead of 4, for example. So there's some of that as well. But I think the big thing is really kind of that affordability and just providing a range of options. Some people prefer this, some people prefer bigger lots, and so just having a wide range of options available. All right, anything else for the public hearing? Seeing nothing else, I will close the public hearing, but looking for comments, questions. Ed?
I will recuse on G, H, and I.
Okay, all right. Other comments, thoughts on making this change? Sonia, do you know for the Viridian development by the fire station, Uptown, are those lots smaller, and maybe we should have done this for that project as well?
Those are in smart code,
Oh.
so they were already exempted, but I believe the lot widths are generally similar.
Okay, so in smart code, you can already go smaller. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Other concerns, questions at all? Tom?
Question, staff, in reference to, I'm going back what the mayor just said, reference to the houses on Cyan Road or by the firehouse there. As far as the looks, I didn't think they were that small. It could be, tell me if I'm wrong, but I thought they were a little larger than that. As far as, I'm going to call it my own term, not the city's, the high density that I see on Cyan Road, that's my term. This change, do you see this similar to that or not, or bigger? What's your thought on that?
I believe they would produce a very similar product. Again, the lot width, applicants would know this in more detail than I would, but ranging in width from, I think, 18 feet wide to 30 feet wide. So I think this would be similar to the lots you're referencing on Cyan. The single
And I know
family
the
lots.
applicant, or I know these are a little different because if I'm not mistaken, well, I should wait. But I think the garages are flipped. It's flipped versus on Cyan Road. You see the houses, garages in the back. Just from your memory, tell me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure these garages face Seminole Highway versus the other way around. Am I correct?
Right, it still has the same principle as far as how it interacts with the neighborhood, or the front of the house is still on the public street, internal to the development, and then the garages, you're right, would face Lacey and Seminole. But again, those are probably comments more specific to the rezone, and we're just on the ordinance amendment at this point.
All right. Any other comments on the ordinance at all? See none. If someone would like to make a motion on the ordinance, that'd be great.
A motion to approve ordinance 2019026. Yeah.
Someone want to second that?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Rich. All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And then
Abstain.
abstention from Ed. Great. All right, so that is approved. Moving on to H. Gentlemen, if you'd like to come on up, and thank you. Thank you, both Brian and Dan. Go ahead and tell us about what you're doing here.
All right. Well, while Sonia's pulling up the slideshow, again, thank you for an opportunity to be here tonight. My name is Brian Munson, Principal of Vanderwall and Associate. With me is Dan Day from Donofrio-Kotke, here on behalf of Viridian Homes. And we felt it'd be appropriate just to do a quick walkthrough, just to address some of the questions that have been raised, as well as where we are in the process. Of course, acknowledging your timing tonight, we'll try to be as brief as we can. Again, introductions, of course, here on behalf of Viridian Homes. One of the things we always want to try to start with is a little bit of how we got here and why. Because we do take an approach towards our planning of our neighborhoods around kind of three key principles. The first of which is housing variety. So Mayor, as you mentioned, we approach every project from the context of what the property is and where it is in a community, and look for opportunities to enhance and add to housing choices for every spectrum. And I would agree with you 100% that an entire community of smaller lots wouldn't be appropriate. But when we look at the balance of a community, we try to find ways to offer housing that currently isn't available, both in format and in price point. And so we then try to build a model around the project based on the property itself and where it sits within the community that then lends itself to being a positive addition in the neighborhood and the community in terms of housing variety. The second is vibrancy. We recognize the details matter. The architecture of these buildings need to matter. They need to have that front porch feel as a home. And so we do try to design to create a sense of community both within our project, but then also place it in the context of the community as a whole and how it functions within the adjoining properties. The final piece is sustainability. We do integrate both within the homes as well as the site a very close look at the environmental sustainability, so stormwater management, open space utilization, buffers, and then transitioning into the house as to energy efficiency, green built, Energy Star components whenever possible within the project, so that we look at both how it functions now and in the future as it becomes and ages in place. To talk about our site, of course, we're at the northeast corner of Lacey and Seminole on a 20-acre parcel. This was originally designed as part of the North Stoner Prairie Neighborhood Plan back several years ago, with a lot that's happened since then. A lot of the neighboring properties have really been developing, whether that's the William Ryan Homes neighborhood to our east and north, Blackhawk Church immediately north of us, and then the emerging employment center to the west of us. So we're very excited about the positioning of this site within this neighborhood and have tried to design that to respond to what's happened and what is happening. Specifically, this is designed to meet the clutter amendment in terms of the density changes that were recommended for this project, and we appreciate Sonia's very thorough vetting of the neighborhood in terms of how the metrics are applied here. But we did design this to meet all of that conversation to reflect the 5 to 9 dwellings per acre. Minong is not actually right on the break, but again, north of that is kind of for orientation, 5 to 9, south of that 5 to 6. And that led us to the concept that we presented here previously and now updating to tonight, which is for 121 total units, owner-occupied, combination of single-family homes, which would be very comparable to what you see in Uptown Crossing, as well as then some attached product. And the attached product is either actually being further defined in this application versus the concept to try to break it out into multiple building types. So we have sites that are flat that would still have a carriage access garage, but then we have some sites where the grade allows it to actually tuck the garage underneath. That is really the principal change from the concept plan that was submitted here and talked about previously. But again, the goal of this project is to transition from Blackhawk Church around the Seminole Highway frontage along Lacey with the twin homes, and then transition from that into our single family, which then goes out to the east. We still have, of course, our power line corridor right here with our stormwater management. And then to address the aesthetics around, we've tried to make sure that we've left ample room for buffer landscaping and improvements to the site and the periphery so that we can then look at how that looks from the adjoining regional network. As mentioned previously, all the homes would front into an interior network of public streets. And again, the benefit of this carriage lane access is you really have a focus on that front door where you have the homes with the porches fronting out to the streets, creating a nice walking district. We have a small pocket park located in the center here. This will be owned and maintained by the HOA. And we do anticipate connections for the trail to our north as well as the trail to our south, a sidewalk connection coming through here, and then a full network of sidewalks within the project. That, of course, is coupled up with our preliminary plat application, which goes in line with the amendments as was approved on the previous item. Again, this is not a concept that we've just kind of started looking at. This is 20 years worth of implementation, and we always find the best way to see what it looks like is go kick the tires and go look at what this looks like after 20 years worth of residence. So it's not just looking nice for the first homeowner, but how does it function down the line when it's the third, fourth, fifth, sixth homeowner? And have they made the improvements and kept things up? And we're very proud of our track record spanning from Grandview Commons, which began in 1998 and 99, Smith's Crossing out in Sun Prairie, as well as Hidden Oaks in Middleton, and then more recently the Uptown Crossing project, which is just now nearing completion. what that looks like. And again, I'll point out, all the photos in this presentation are from Viridian projects. So these are actual twin homes and single-family homes from our neighborhoods that showcase what these will look like. Again, the twin homes form the outer band in this direction. 46 total units. We're anticipating 3 to 4 bedroom units on each side. A party wall down the middle will be actually a lot line as well to divide these into fee simple opportunities so that you can own either side of that twin home. And our target entry market is really that entry home buyer or a downsizer. We see both spectrums of that housing market. And again, this project is designed to try to give opportunities for people either to enter the housing market that may be renters today, or maybe looking for something different in their housing choices. They may not want the maintenance of a large yard, or they may be looking simply for a smaller footprint. Again, also note, all the units within this project will be accessed by a private carriage lane that'll be owned and maintained by the HOA, and it's something we've done in multiple other communities as well. Just to kind of give some points of what these look like, here's a ranch plan. Again, the goal of this is to have 1- and 2-story formats that would allow home ownership opportunities within the project while increasing affordability within the community. The twin homes are divided into that flat site where you have a garage at grade at the back of the house, as well as some opportunities on the southern edge where they tuck underneath the units, so you'd have a garage in the lower level and walk up to your living space, which should be at the street grade. Also to point out, the interior finishes, fit and finish of all these projects, whether you're in a single-family home or a twin home, we view these as homes. So the finishes within all of this product will be comparable, regardless of whether you're in a twin home or whether you're in the single-family homes. Speaking of the single-family homes, again, this is our transition from the twin homes, again, to the east, to the neighborhood east of us. We have 65 total lots, spanning 2- and 4-bedroom, with the same target market. The goal of this project is, as a 20-acre parcel, to really diversify the housing within the greater context of the neighborhood. And so we see this as a great counterpoint in addition to what's around us, all of which would be accessed by a private carriage lane. Similar to the twin homes, you can see how the focus is on the architecture, the porches, the front door, the feel of the street, access to sidewalks and walkability is a really critical component. I would also point out, although we don't have front-load homes in this project, that these homes themselves, if you think about the actual living space, is comparable to what you would find on a 70-foot or between a 60 to 70-foot wide lot. Because again, we're taking 24 feet worth of garage width, which is driving the lot width, taking that off the side and moving it around the back. So the home itself hasn't changed, just how we've accommodated the vehicle has changed significantly. The other significant difference, of course, is the yard. On a traditional front load, you may have a larger backyard. In a case like this, you'll have a smaller courtyard that would then give some private space to these projects, to each individual home. But again, the house itself is very comparable to a larger conventional front load house. Just to give some local examples, I was out last week taking some pictures up at Uptown Crossing, and these last 2 shots show you the implementation of that project, which we are now nearing sellout of that project. Has been a very successful implementation, and so we're excited to extend that opportunity here on the west side of Fitchburg.
I don't mean to interrupt, but how many years did it take to get to this point?
In terms of
For Uptown sellout, yeah, is it 3
We
years?
started, yeah, about 3 years.
Okay.
Probably building somewhere around 25 to 30 a year, I think is what Viridian was doing there. And we expect a similar type velocity here.
Great.
The final piece of the neighborhood is the open spaces, and this is a very comparable space as what you'd find along Minong. It's a gathering place. We'll have benches and open space for small gatherings. We do see this as offering an addition to the neighborhood, but not being the active park. Part of this project and part of the Stormwater Neighborhood Plan anticipated a larger neighborhood park coupled up with the school so that you could leverage the school site as well. And so that's been implemented to our east. We see this project as offering additional fee in lieu of support for improvements within that park. And so we're excited to have that in very close proximity to this neighborhood. But we feel that the smaller pocket park in this will give a gathering point and some diversity of space within the neighborhood, and then further accent that with the Stoner Prairie Park to the east, as noted here on the map. So here is our site right here. The William Ryan Homes project will fill in as they phase to the south, and then you can see the park that is anticipated east of us, which will really serve as that active park for the greater neighborhood.
Point out the trails.
The trail connections, which are critical, we are improving and extending the trail, and and agree with the staff comment about it, building the trail across Blackhawk Church within the easement. The easement will actually dip down into our parcel to line up with the easement to the east, but we'll be implementing that trail connection across the north side, as well as extending the regional trail along our frontage along Lacey Road. So we'll have 2 points of access to the region from a trail sense, in addition to the sidewalk connections through all of the street networks. And again, we see that as a great opportunity to both, for our residents and residents of the region, to be able to move freely throughout the neighborhood and get to destinations, whether that's the school to our east or the employment to our west. Those will form good connections in addition to the vehicular connections that will be present when the network is built out. Let's see here. If you could click forward one for me. This is, apologize. And then the final piece is the stormwater management. We appreciate the dialogue we've had with city staff and continue to work together in the design of that stormwater system to make sure that it meets the applicable standards. We do see that as an amenity. It's not just intended to be, sorry, Dan, a square box of engineering, but to be an asset both functionally in the future. This is a picture of one of the stormwater basins out in Smith's Crossing in Sun Prairie. So we look at those as amenity points within the neighborhood as well in terms of open space and landscape them appropriately and try to design them to fit into the context of the area around it. Whoop. We'll go quick, but as I mentioned, this is not an experiment for us. This is something we've been doing for more than 20 years now. We have thousands of homes in this exact format that have been successfully integrated into numerous communities throughout Dane County and continue to see appreciation and value in those in terms of people investing in them, people still seeing them as really desirable homes and forming an important bridge to transition from renter to home ownership, potentially out into other homes or back. And so we're excited to bring this here tonight. The final point I would note is that, just being temperative, here, is that the HOA will span the entire neighborhood. It will be tasked with maintenance and use, long-term care of the open spaces as well as the carriage lanes. This is similar to what we've done in Middleton and in Sun Prairie in terms of private carriage lanes that are then maintained by the HOA. And we do establish, as part of that HOA, a professional management company that comes in and takes care of that, sets it up, makes sure that it has the funds necessary to function long into the future. And we have a strong mechanism to where Veridian is a component of that HOA all the way through to the last sale. So we make sure that is set up for the long run because we want to make sure that regardless of where this goes, that the commitments that are made in terms of the HOA maintenance are met and extended into the future. From a timing sense, my apologies. If we can go back one more, this is the last slide. There we go. Okay, from a timing sense, as I mentioned, we are here for the concept plan review discussion about this project. We are now here at the GDP preliminary plat, but that's not the last step by far. We will be working in close concert with city staff over the span of the coming fall as this moves towards the next and final stages. And every step along the way, additional details are designed and implemented to make sure that the stormwater management, the street cross sections, the infrastructure, all of the components of how this project will actually get implemented will go through a review process, much like you had with Phoenix. There will be a lot of details that come forward throughout this, and we're excited and look forward to working with you as we move into the implementation. Our goal is to bring a final plat back to this body late this year or early 2020 with a goal of breaking ground on the project in 2020. We anticipate this being somewhere between a 3 to 6 year project depending on market conditions. We do recognize we'll have to phase, we'll be looking at Minong as our point of entry and then building the street grid in support of the proposal throughout. So with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right. Before we get to staff, I'm just going to have a couple of comments from public. So if you could just take for a second, step back here. I have
Happy
Rita Henricks first, and I don't think Jay is here, but I have some comments that I can pass out from Jay as well. So Rita, you are up.
Good evening. I'm Rita Burke-Henricks, a Fitchburg resident for about 15 years. Thank you for hearing me this evening. This looks like a good project of needed homes, but there are concerns that need to be addressed. Please use the net number when determining the number of units allowed. Using the gross number negates the reason for having a net number. You need to consider how much land is impervious, how much is needed for drainage ponds, where children will play. You're setting precedents that will come back to damage Fitchburg in the future if you use a gross number. Developers want as much profit as they can get. I understand we want to keep it as low as priced as possible, but Fitchburg needs to consider more than just profit the developer makes. Please have an independent study look at the right size of the pond and how they're going to be maintained. This is going to be given to the city, which means any problems in the future are also given to the city. Will it need constant maintenance? Will it be large enough? Don't ask Fitchburg to incur costs in the future for mistakes. Look at what happened to the kettle. Fitchburg can't afford to ruin natural resources or to fix errors, if they're fixable at all. From what I hear, you can't fix the kettle. Please solve the current traffic issues and plan carefully for the number of cars this is going to add instead of making it worse. That's a terrible place there right now, trying to get through, and unless that's taken care of, it's only going to be worse. Consider Fitchburg residents. Don't rush to approve just because this housing is needed. Make sure it's right. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rita. I also have some comments from Jay Hockmuth from here in Fitchburg. I can read this quick. I passed out copies to everyone here, and also we'll put these in the minutes. Hello, Plan Commission members. Thank you for the opportunity to offer comments tonight on the preliminary plat and rezoning request for the Crescent Crossing neighborhood. My name is Jay Hockmuth. I lived in Fitchburg for 33 years. This morning, the president of the Lacey Heights Neighborhood Association and the president of the Seminole Forest Neighborhood Association sent you an email, which is attached, asking that you recommend to the council that 4 conditions of approval be added to those recommended by staff that are listed on pages 34 and 35 of the agenda packet. These conditions are designed to address the issues that arose at a meeting hosted by Viridian Homes on June 17th. People attended were glad to hear homes and duplexes in Crescent Crossing will be owner-occupied, were supportive of the concept plan presented on June 17th, and appreciated Viridian's commitment to address issues that come up as the approval process continues. To this end, for the reasons listed in Attachment A, also attached to your list, please vote to add the following approval conditions to 18 approval conditions recommended by staff. Number 1, the number of housing units be limited to 98 instead of the 121 proposed. 2, VH acquisitions reimburse the city for the expenses the city incurs to independently verify whatever means the city deems appropriate the validity of the capacity calculations for proposed stormwater detention and infiltration basins to the extent that city employees do not have the expertise needed to do that. 3, VH acquisitions and the city prepare a mutually acceptable staging plan that assures Crescent Crossing lot sales and Seminole Highway upgrades are coordinated to minimize the impacts of Crescent Crossing traffic on Seminole Highway. Number 4, VH acquisitions and the city prepare a mutually acceptable staging plan for connecting Minong Lane to a street in a new neighborhood to the east, for which our preliminary plat has yet to be approved, in order to provide a second entrance to and exit from Crescent Crossing. Thank you for considering these comments, which are offered in consideration of the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Sincerely, Jay Hockmuth. And those are all I have for citizen comments. Do you want to give a staff report, please?
Sure. So procedurally, the 2 items on the agenda, first we have the preliminary plat, and second is the rezone. There will be another public hearing opened on the rezone and perhaps more comments from the applicant if there was anything that was not already mentioned. So a lot of my comments will relate to both. As noted, this was reviewed in a pre-application meeting back on June 18th. A lot of the staff comments shared at that time and that the Plan Commission considered are the same that they will be tonight. A neighborhood meeting was also held on June 17th. That neighborhood meeting is required as part of the Plan Development District rezoning process. The question of density, the area of the lot proposed is just about 21 acres, and there's a table breaking down the north area versus the south area in the staff report. That's page 7. So I'll just read some comments directly from the staff report. Again, 121 total units proposed. The gross density would allow up to 149, and then using net density would allow up to 98. So using gross density, the development is under the allowable range by 28 units. Using net density, the development is over the allowable range by 27. This net density number is subject to change since it is based on some approximations. One example of that approximation might be the exact size of the north parcel versus the south parcel. And I think the neighborhood plan says that that line and those numbers could shift a little bit based on more detailed land use planning and site plan design that would come in the future. Densities can easily increase using the net area. The net density can change depending on if roads are public or private, for example. So if all of the internal streets became private streets, just as one example, that would increase the base of the land area available, thereby reducing the net density. So the point being, the character of the development is the same. We still feel the 121 units or proposed lots, whether that street is public or private. Again, from the staff report, one could argue that if the streets were private versus public, the character, traffic, and population of the development would be unchanged, and therefore using the net density number should not change how the project is evaluated as far as development character. And then I also note the comprehensive plan and our ordinance do not dictate which metric needs to be used. So at some level, using gross density at the concept planning stages is appropriate, because at that point, using exact undevelopable acres could not have been anticipated at the neighborhood planning stages. And when we're looking at consistency with the comprehensive plan, we look to sort of legal interpretations of what consistent with means, and that means that it does not contradict or that it does further the goals, objectives, and policies of the plan. So the comprehensive plan is not in itself a regulation like a zoning setback is, like a side yard setback of 10 feet. Instead, it's a policy guide, and we look to that consistent with as far as furthering the goals, objectives, and policies of the plan. So that's the same staff interpretation that was shared at the last review of this meeting. There are also staff comments regarding Parkland and Public Works comments in the staff report. Staff approval is recommended for the preliminary plat with 18 conditions. I'll just touch on those quickly for the record. The first one, no other permit or approval is waived or deemed satisfied except for the approval provided herein. Park fees will be calculated with the final plat. This approval is contingent on the council approving the ordinance that we looked at under the last agenda item that would reduce the lot sizes and widths. It's also contingent on council approval of the next item, which is the rezone to both GIP and SIP. SIP rezoning is required prior to signing of any final plat. A subdivision improvement agreement shall be executed prior to city signing of the final plat that will address all of the public improvements. There's a 30-foot easement along Lacey Road, and that shall allow for public water main, sanitary sewer, and a pedestrian path easement. Number 7, the developer will be required to construct the trail within the easement on lot 1 of a CSM to the north. So the applicants mentioned that it's a bike path shown in the neighborhood plan that would go across the Blackhawk property. So this development is required to construct that path. Number 8, provide turning templates to ensure refuse and recycling trucks can access the private alleyways for service. 9 and 10 are standard regarding utilities. 11 would require documentation of ATC's approval for encroachment into underneath their overhead power lines for the stormwater use. 12 is standard regarding stormwater. 13, construction drawings shall be consistent with Public Works review comments. MMSD fees shall be paid. Drainage arrows shall be provided on the final plat. Future design of Seminole Highway and Lacey Road improvements may impact the right-of-way locations that are being dedicated with this project. So the developer shall work with Public Works staff to accommodate necessary right-of-way width with future subdivision improvement agreements and or final plat submittals. 17, additional right-of-way or easement may be needed to increase the capacity of the ditch to the south of this development, and that's south on this project site proper, so just north of Lacey Road. And then finally, 18, grading of Outlot 4, which is along Lacey Road, shall match public improvement grades along the public streets.
All right, thank you. And I can address some of the concerns that were raised. I think, great questions that were raised. And I can just go through these really quick. The first thing, just talking about this net versus gross, I did ask our resident historian before this, even though he's refraining from speaking on this, about this gross versus net. Is that something that we've talked about in the past? What have we done in the past? and he doesn't remember this coming up in the past. It's not something that we've discussed or have gone one way or the other. There's not any kind of a precedent set by any means. And so it is something that I've talked with staff about, we should talk about it more. Personally, I guess this is just my opinion, some of the things that are taken out of the net, I don't think should. Things like parkland, for example, because if parkland's not included, you're almost incentivizing developers to not put parkland in because it's hurting them in terms of this net versus gross thing. And, Sonia mentioned the public versus private streets is another piece of that. So I think, there's some further discussion that should probably be done by this group in the future, but I don't want to hold up a project for that discussion. But anyway, just kind of historically, we haven't gone one way or the other and set precedents there. In terms of concerns about stormwater, that's something that is a big concern in this area, of course. We are doing a broader stormwater survey of this area to figure out storm, but all projects, including this one, are reviewed both by city and county staff and look at the stormwater and make sure that all needs are met, and that's the case with this. Both the city and the county have looked at these things, just like they do for any other project, and have proved this. But I understand that there's a lot of areas of concern in this neighborhood. Third one here is a staging plan, coordinating to minimize traffic impacts. Actually, in the CIP process, Alder Clouder is with us today. He proposed moving up the reconstruction of McKee Road to a couple years earlier, actually. I believe it's in 21 now. And so I think that this was part of the reason for that, is so that that road would get improved when this is really getting built out, along with Hop House and Race Day Events and Pro Mega and Sub-Zero and the church, for example.
McKee Road?
McKee Road, yeah, yep, to Lacey, essentially, that intersection going to the north. So there, we did bump up some of those improvements to address some of the traffic concerns.
Okay.
Oh, I said the wrong word, Seminole.
No,
Sorry.
Lacey. We're talking about Lacey improvement. not
Lacey
McKee.
and Seminole. Oh, Lacey, okay, Lacey, sorry.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I-
All right. Sorry. And the fourth one, the staging plan for connecting Minong Lane. I guess I'm not exactly sure. I think it sounds like a concern with another entry in and out of this. But I guess I wouldn't want to, not let them develop until someone else develops. That's the way I read that. I might be reading that wrong, but that's up for you to decide as well. So I can address those, but other than that, comments, questions, concerns people have on this development? Questions for applicants, anything like that?
Does Minong Road does it go further east?
No, that was
It
that other
will.
concern, number 4, that it's just the one. It ends right at the end.
I think the plan is for it to connect to the William Ryan development to the east of this.
Yeah, someday, right? Or,
It will.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will connect through, once they develop theirs, but that's up to them on when they're gonna develop their part.
So the emails I saw that, something happened in a meeting that you guys had, a community meeting, where this, net versus gross came up. Can you explain how that went? Or,
Sure, be happy to. And I'd be happy to talk to any of the points raised. When we look at a project, I'll kind of step back to a planning. So when we're doing a neighborhood project, a neighborhood plan project, we typically would approach it from a gross sense, because there's not a known component of saying how much street frontage is going to be there, because that's really dependent upon the final application. We wouldn't have necessarily all of the components of the stormwater management identified in a neighborhood plan per se. So a gross model is typically used to help project how many units could happen and give kind of a framework that's an easier metric, because you can look at entire parcels and assume and assign some densities to help identify the framework. And in fact, the comprehensive plan anticipated for those projections 7 dwelling units per acre for residential densities. Again, as a metric to begin to understand what kind of infrastructure is going to be needed. In this case, when we look at specifically the property, the 21 acres, that's where we get to that meeting the Clouder Amendment in terms of gross density, which is the entire parcel. As Sonia mentioned, the differential to net, we then start to look at, and there's ways to adjust the numbers that don't change the format. As mentioned, for example, if we just took Minong and said, okay, that's the public street, that's about an acre all the way across the site. Everything north of this site is private, everything south is private. That includes the buffers, that includes the alleys, that includes the stormwater management. All of that can be done as easements on a lot. If we took that approach and said all the streets are private, you could get up to 139 dwelling units per acre net.
Total.
139 total units on this site net. When we talked with Sonia, we were trying to be reflective of the actual built environment. And so that's where we took out the parks, we took out the stormwater, we took out the alleys, we took out the streets to give an indication of the yield of the lots themselves. Again, the differential between 139 and the 98 is identical in form, identical in number of units, identical in number of residents, buildings, all the above. It's just a different way to measure it. We do feel that in a case like this, while it is in between both, it's indicative of that transition from the general planning down to more detailed planning. But we think it's appropriately scaled given what was anticipated for this site, which was medium-density residential. If the goal of the neighborhood plan, goal of the comprehensive plan was simply to have this echo the adjoining properties, the application of those densities would be entirely different. So we see this as furthering those goals of the comprehensive plan to bring some additional types of housing that aren't currently there. But we recognize and we agree with Sonia's analysis that when you kind of weigh both factors, we think that being kind of in the middle of both is indicative of housing that's appropriate for this location.
Further comments, questions at all? Rich?
I had a short question. 4 phases, right?
Yes.
3 to 6 years, right? Is that 3 to 6 years for all phases or for each phase, or?
That would be for all phases. And just to clarify on that, our phase 1 will take Minong all the way across the site to our eastern boundary. So that would be available for extension if and when the William Ryan Homes project begins to move south. So that component would be completely addressed as part of phase 1. We anticipate this being our phase 1 area and then breaking this lower section into 2 or 3 phases so that some of the discussions about the regional infrastructure can happen in the interim. As mentioned in the comment about the need to accommodate potentially future right-of-way needs for Lacey and Seminole, we're completely comfortable with that because that allows the city to go through that design process while this project phases in that direction, so that as we may get to a final plat down there along Lacey, if there needs to be additional right-of-way dedicated to accommodate the intersection or whatever the transitions are, that's the process and the point where we can do that. We've been in close conversation with the public works staff and the planning staff about what that could look like. But again, because that's not a known at this stage, having that phasing from north to south allows those discussions to happen. It also allows the city to begin to implement some of those improvements over the time span that we're talking about. Again, all these homes won't happen as one. They will be phased based upon market conditions in multiple phases over multiple years.
What do you anticipate the housing prices to start at for the 2 different types, the twin homes versus the single family?
Well, we do, the ability to have the twin homes and the single family broadens that opportunity to offer different price points. A couple things about that is, again, a lot of these homes will be built on specs, not on spec, but built on contract. So when people come to Veridian, they have some choices. I mean, Veridian kind of laughs that they're a production custom builder because so much is available for choice to their buyers. So you may see some price swings based upon people's choices as they buy and implement houses. We do see this as an opportunity to get into the upper 2s and the low 3s with housing in both formats, which is really, I think, reflective of the housing study that you've done as fitting a need, not just for the community, but also in relationship with the employment base that's coming up to our west. So we're excited to offer that. And that's all part of that puzzle of when we talk about density and cost to construct and all the things that happen, that's all kind of knit together. I can tell you that the differential, if you just looked at reducing it to the 98, the net threshold, that'd be a $20,000 to $30,000 increase in price per house, just because we have to cover the same infrastructure effectively with fewer units. Yep. That'd be $100,000 less in fee in lieu of to support the parks. So, I mean, there are challenges in how that all weaves together, but we think that this approach and this proposal allows us to have that critical mass to get to the price point that we think really fits for the location.
Sorry, Bob, the tuck under garages, has Veridian done those before?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, where?
So the Cardinal Glen neighborhood has some twin homes that are tuck under, where they front to the north onto the public street, and then the alley is at lower grade. It allows a couple things. One is it allowed us to widen the buffer space south of it, and at the same time, try to get some additional space in here, because these lots really are the ones that can get a little bit shallower, because we're not dealing with as much depth. Again, talking about how we store cars, we're storing cars under the house as opposed to behind the house. So now that lot doesn't have to be quite as deep. Now, that doesn't really change the dynamics this way. It does allow a little bit of additional space along Seminole for those buffers to happen. And so that's what that tuck under garage really offers, is the ability just to look at those spaces, and we've tried to shuffle those out as best we can to the open spaces.
Currently, more current than Cardinal Glen, Veridian is building some of these tuck unders at the neighborhood on the east side called the Village at Autumn Lake. Started those twins probably late last year, and in the process right now of selling them. They're actually being very, very popular on for sale product.
That's east side of Madison?
Yep, so that's off of Felon Road on the far east side out near Easttown, so east of the interstate. So on the corner of Lean and Felon, you'd find those.
Other questions? Tom?
I know, for you four, just so you understand, there's a couple of you that been here before, but as you know, this is at North Stormwater Prairie. The applicant has brought up my name a number of times in reference to the changing the density and changing the whole, the way we did things, and I appreciate that. He was accurate. But for you four, just so you understand, the CIP was back. I moved it a couple years up for Lacey Road at Seminole Highway to get the traffic light or roundabout. Don't ask me what. Sooner than later. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And anybody that drives it knows it. So just so you're aware of it, what's going on. Okay. Now we'll move on. Obviously, this is dear to my heart, and I have some questions for you guys. So the water in this area is a problem. It's not your problem. It is your problem, but it's also a city problem. And let's use the city first. It's a city problem. And I'm not an engineer, but this will be recorded, so in 15 years I won't be here. But the fact is there's a house on Lacey Road, on Seminole Highway, the O'Brien house, that sits by itself. It's a ranch. I'll say that again. I'm not an engineer, but that's where we should have a stormwater basin. This area is a problem. And we are flooding it with a lot of development all over. It's not your fault. That brings me to traffic. When I look at this plan, is there a reason in the corner there in the bottom left you didn't have another exit point coming out Lacey Road? Or was that discussed? You have the exits going on Seminole Highway, and you also have them going to the east towards the neighborhoods. Help me out with your exits a little bit.
Yep. Do you want to?
Go ahead.
Sure. So we did look at whether or not that road could punch out to Lacey, and the challenge in looking at the intersection to our west. So this sits at a point, to explain the street grid, I apologize, I don't have a plan that shows the William Ryan plat right here, which is part of that distribution of traffic.
It was, yeah.
Of course, we've got our access to Seminole. This will extend over a block and then drops down to an access point at Lacey. The reason to not have an intersection point here is this intersection. That allows you ample spacing to accommodate whether you need to have turn lanes, if it's a roundabout, a bypass lane, whatever turn movements you need can be accommodated along this frontage without complication of introducing an intersection that could further exacerbate stacking at that intersection. We will have, when this all builds out, again, it's part of a bigger neighborhood, we will have a second point here where you can get out to Lacey. That's further east along the frontage. It's already platted in their preliminary plat. so that if you wanted to go this way and avoid the intersection, you could. We would then have this be our secondary access. To help for kids who want to get to school, we do have that sidewalk connection so that you could walk down to the Lacey bike path and then head east, as well as if you wanted to go east through the neighborhood on either the bike path or Minong Lane and street grid to our east.
I'm aware of the stacking at that intersection. I figured that's what you were going to say. I wanted you to say it, though. Lacey Road at Seminole Highway, I see a little blue there. I'm sorry, I can't see it. Is that kind of a retention pond or something? I don't know what it is. I can't see what it is. What is that right there?
Yeah, that is the one portion of our stormwater management
Okay.
for the site. The other portion's on the east side and the ATC easement on the east side. So
Staff brought up water and city looking at it. I get that. Do you have an expert on staff or somebody within Munson that's looking at water or?
yeah, I mean, our firm, D'Onofrio Kaki, we do stormwater management reports all the time. And do them quite regularly. So we've actually prepared the stormwater management report for this already, and the basins here reflect that. You know, obviously, it hasn't been reviewed with a fine-tooth comb yet by the city staff or the county staff, but as we go through that process in the coming months, we do have room to make some flexible changes if we need to on that preliminary study. So we've got some room built in case we need to adjust to meet, you know, the comments that we might see during that process.
And it's, to be fair to you and fair to the project, this water problem is maybe a city problem that we haven't looked at in the past. So I'm aware of that.
Yep.
But I'm also aware what is about to come.
Yeah, and there's a couple components about that. So the stormwater plan does incorporate the regional issue in terms of how does stormwater get along as it comes comes to our site from the east. The regional stormwater, how does that then get along Lacey Road? So that's one component of it. The second component of it is how do we handle the stormwater for this design? So that this project handles its own stormwater and doesn't exacerbate that regional issue. The final piece is the reason why this basin is shown further north is, again, anticipating that there may be additional needs for right-of-way. So as that intersection expands or doesn't expand, it doesn't mean that suddenly there's not space for the stormwater. We tried to make sure that that was pushed out to accommodate and give some flexibility in that intersection design as well.
It's interesting, we talk about water, and it was, what, a year ago today that Dane County got hit.
Yep.
And I got water in my basement, too. It was about a year ago today. Exactly. Units. Correct me if I'm wrong. I did some research in my homework on this. In the northern section, there's 8 acres. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Like 8?
About that, yes.
And you have, I believe it's 43 units, 43, 44, 45, fine, that's fine. Does that sound right? For the northern, or how many do you have for the northern 8 acres?
Approximately 43.
Approximately
I think
43.
That's what Sonia's staff
Yeah,
report says here.
and again, the differential in that acres, that plan line actually falls slightly south of Minong. So if you look, so it doesn't quite line up perfectly.
Okay.
But yes, I would say we've got the 43 units to the north and the balance to the south.
Okay, to the north. I'm, just so you know, I'm good with that. You guys are fine with that. Let's go to the south.
Okay.
In the south, there's 13 acres. And, well, let me ask you, how many units do you have?
The staff report points out 78, which I think is a number that we, concur with.
Yep.
How'd you come up with 78, that high number?
Well, again, the differential between the concept plan that was submitted and this is this rim right here. That's the additional 3 units. By transitioning that to a twin home, that allows us to have that tuck under option. One thing that we haven't done with Viridian is a tuck under single family. We've seen acceptance in the market for attached product for the tuck under, but they don't have a single family model. And so as such, by transitioning this to tuck under, that allowed us to increase this space and this space, but it came with a net gain of 3 units. The other aspect of this is as we looked to our frontages, again, Seminole and Lacey being larger volume roads, we felt it was appropriate transition point in terms of the density transitions and putting some
Stop
of
right
that
there,
along.
stop right there, just for, didn't mean to interrupt you, but I can't let that one go by. Seminole and Lacey are not high volume, they are high volume roads.
Yep.
And we're adding to it, we're pounding on it. My concern is the number of units you have in the north, which is 78, and if we said 60, or, you know, that, I'm fine with it, don't get me wrong. But we're like, I thought we talked about in some of the meetings with the neighbors, now, I'm not positive on this, but was around 60, okay, and we're at 78. Yeah, they're high-volume roads. I totally agree with you. And what's coming on here is more volume. And there's a lot of us sitting up here won't be here, I keep saying, in years to come, and it was brought up tonight. We're flooding this area. I'm trying to help you, not hurt you. Is there any way you can bring that north down?
Well, I think the combined number of units, again, getting back.
I don't have to agree with staff.
That's
I'm
fine.
kidding.
The combined number of units is a function of the affordability for this project. If you think about the way that, regardless of if this was 60 units total, we'd have the same linear frontage of streets within the project. That incremental cost to build that street, to pay for the land, gets factored into the price point of the project. Now, Veridian is intent on trying to find ways to deliver an attainable product here, and the cost to construct is a critical component of that. And as I mentioned, if you look at and start to reduce the density, the components then are spreading that cost over fewer units, and that's where you start to see that affordability erode for a handful of lots. We do think that the road networks that are around us can accommodate the traffic, regardless if this was twice as dense than what it is today.
Tommy disagrees.
Yep.
But keep talking.
That's fine. But that we do recognize that there are improvements that are coming and are interested in facilitating that. And one of the other mechanisms that this density does allow then is the additional tax base to help offset some of those costs.
I think the point that Brian was trying to make a little bit was with the transition from Lacey and Seminole being the higher volume use roadways, and that it made sense to transition from those higher use roadways with the twin home product versus the single family product, and then transition to the single family product to the east. I mean, Alder Clouder, we could certainly have taken all the twins and thrown them up on the north side of it and put the more density up there and done the singles in the south part, but we don't think that's as smart a play in the overall scheme of the neighborhood. I'm trying to set up a transition or from the two roadways to the existing neighborhood to the east of us. We thought this was a great transition to be able to do that, and this is the way that we believe and Veridian believes is the best way to put this together, to factor all the pieces of the puzzle together.
You're probably getting more questions from me than these other planners because it's my district. I'm raised in this neighborhood.
Yep.
Understood.
I travel this road a lot. My family travels this road a lot. The neighbors tell me at the grocery store, anywhere I go, the mess. So I'm trying to, can I solve the whole thing? No, but I'm going to raise the issues.
Yep. Nope, totally appreciate that.
And I don't like your south. Too many units. But I'm assuming, tell me if I'm wrong, staff, that if this is approved tonight, it's both north and south.
Do the whole thing.
I have to ask you, what does it matter whether it's north or south when the entrance point is only in that one point? It'd be different if we had a road going off to Lacey and a road going to Seminole. Then the north-south within these two properties would concern me, but you only have one access point.
Which makes it worse.
But if you shuffle the houses around, what does it matter?
It makes it worse because with the situation right now is to the east, we do not have a development there yet. In other words, they're still in the planning stage. So when this goes, everything's coming on Seminole Highway, which is a crowded mess. Can you imagine the traffic that's going to hit this intersection when that comes out without another, can I say, exit? I think it's a mess.
It's all phased, right?
So I think Tom's just saying he wants less, period, not necessarily where they are.
Okay.
Rich, do you?
Yeah, I like the idea of transition. I like the idea of your planning on the intersection of Lacey. But we've been hearing about water problems for years. Would it be possible to put in something like pervious pavement for the alleys or the back roads or any of that?
You know,
Cost prohibitive or?
there's many ways to accomplish your stormwater management goals, and the requirements that are set forth by the rules and the regulations that we have to follow. What we have in place here right now is using a impervious pavement, but we have the infiltration counted for in the actual stormwater basins themselves. I mean, that would be a trade-off that we would potentially look at as far as that goes, is doing maybe some pervious pavement versus as large as stormwater basins. And it becomes a cost-benefit analysis that you have to look at, and we have to maintain that cost-benefit analysis when we look very hard at those things, just because of the affordability factor that we're trying to, attainability factor that we're trying to maintain here. So, yeah, I mean, we're always open to new things, but are they effectively achieving what your goals and requirements are in the process is what we really got to maintain to.
Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
So I was afraid to ask why that, the stormwater retention on the left was so small, and I figured it was probably for future road enhancement. Is there opportunity on the east side for that to grow if we find that the rainwater runoff is going to be too severe for what you already have planned? Or how much flexibility do we have in additional retention ponds?
We do have some flexibility on the east side. And, you know, we've got some additional room to the south of where we're showing the infiltration basin there. And it depends where it shakes out in the final numbers, but I'm fairly comfortable with what we have on the drawing light here, that will become very close to what ends up being the final size for the stormwater basins. If we have to increase because of X, Y, Z assumptions in the stormwater report, we have some flexibility to be able to do that. Again, we're doing our part for our site to try to mitigate the future problems. That's not going to take care of the future problems, and no matter how big you make these basins, it's not going to make a difference of what's going on with the overall global picture that Alder Clowder has pointed out.
How does it connect to the church? 'Cause I know we were arguing left and right about the church's stormwater as well. Is this, because this is down, it should be right, if I remember correctly, the
Church, I believe, goes to the north
Just
with the
north.
The
stormwater.
church's stormwater goes to
does
the
go to
north.
north.
All
Yeah.
of, the stormwater for this entire project will
Yeah, so
come.
it kind of breaks right
south.
at the path there.
fair.
I know traffic is a big concern that's been raised. What I find interesting is it's really only been raised with this project, and we've got
No matter what we
Omega,
come up with, right?
Sub-Zero, Race Day
Right.
Events, Hop House, the church, William Ryan, and all those things, some of which are going to contribute more traffic to this area. I do like that we moved up the project to help address some of the traffic concerns in this area, but in some respects, I feel like maybe people just like refrigerators and beer and those things more than houses, but I guess it does make me a little queasy when we're seeing this group get hammered on that when these other handful of projects haven't been hammered on that. So I guess it is an issue, it is a concern, but.
Mayor, there's a difference in, look at the volume of this project versus maybe the church on Sunday, which I was a strong opponent of to make sure we had a turn lane off of Seminole Highway to get into that church. I followed that like a hawk. But this is a different scenario. This scenario versus what you just described is totally different. These are homes, these are neighbors, these are visitors, these are people that are going to travel and live here. The bar, we get people that come and go. The church isn't maybe on Sunday, could be wrong, but it's on Sunday. The other plants, that was before my time. But this is a huge deal here for the city.
I just don't feel like
Wayne, go ahead.
23 units overall is going to make a mass difference in traffic. There's gonna be traffic there. The development's always gonna outpace the infrastructure. It is what it is, right? This is all phased, so it's gonna come 4, 5, 6 years down the road. The infrastructure hopefully will catch up a little bit, but you can't, what are you gonna put here? Just one house then? I don't know what to do. We argued hard about when it was high density that they didn't want the traffic. Okay, well, we went to your density number. We argued for months on that, came up with a compromise. I don't think we can just have traffic stop it. Dan, did your, off question, did your firm design Thousand Oaks?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so funny story, I had a house, we sold a house there to a lovely lady, and it was a year ago today, and it rained like mad, and her basement was open. And I was fearing, because at that time, that development, it's another Viridian development, was maybe in the first phase, I guess, maybe first or second phase. And I was fearing what was gonna happen when we went there after this rain, because that was right over off Mineral Point. Everything drained perfectly. It was perfect, she got in the house in time, the neighborhood looks great. Point being is, I'm going to give you guys a huge attaboy on that one, and you'll get my support, because I've seen it in action, I saw it.
Same stormwater engineer that designed that did this one here too.
Yeah, okay, I was hoping you'd say that, because that should have been a mess, but it wasn't. Took care of everything, so I have no problem with the storm management part either, especially knowing staff's behind it. But as for the net versus gross thing, can Ed literally not talk if he's abstaining? Can he not say a word?
He doesn't want to. He wants to just completely
wanna hear him.
recuse himself. He just doesn't want to have any semblance of impropriety.
I get it, but God.
The concern about traffic, I think, is fair, but how much of that has been since the construction on Verona Road? Because I've hit this Lacey and Seminole going to and from work only because of the roundabout and that intersection at PD and 151.
Right.
I never took this to work in my 9 years, but I did this summer. And yeah, it's terrible, but I'm wondering how much of that, and because I never traveled it more than 6 months ago, I don't know. But I think that needs to be weighed into this. When we're talking about traffic in the city, we are under such a construction gridlock that it's ruining everyone's perception, I'm afraid of. I was gonna ask staff, just in general, what do we have to do so we don't have to discuss net versus gross again? I was hoping there'd be a precedent, we wouldn't have to even really discuss it.
I think that's something that the mayor alluded to a little bit, that it's a future policy or practice discussion that we could have. It could be addressed through amendments to the comprehensive plan update or through an ordinance amendment or in these individual neighborhood plans. As I noted, the plan or plans and the ordinance doesn't dictate how I should measure it at this time.
Okay, so, because I want to take care of that, because I don't like being in this awkward position. Hearing the concern, though, I've done crunching some numbers. First off, I can appreciate that if you take the average between the gross and the net, we're hitting that. So it's not like we're pushing the very boundary of the gross. Also, refresh my memory, what is MDR? 5 to 6, 5 to 9, 5 to 8?
On this project, it's a little bit different.
In
So
general, but
on the north,
I know what it is here.
north
What is it in general?
Oh, in general, 5 to 9 for the
Within
comprehensive
the city of
plan.
Fitchburg, it's 5 to 9. We've restricted it slightly on the southern edge of this to be 5 to 6. But overall, we're at 8.6 on this net. So if we follow the city's MDR across the entire parcel, we are still below that. And so that's where I hear what you're saying, and there is some concern for traffic and what this is gonna do to the area. But in terms of looking at the numbers, I feel like without having precedent, without having an actual, something saying we have to use gross or net, it's at least an average between the two.
Any further, Tom, a little more? Yeah.
Uptown. In reference to the north, I don't think the clutter amendment addressed the north. I thought it was just the south. Am I thinking right?
On this project?
Yeah,
We
at the time.
changed the density on the north end to the 5 to 9 range. 5 to 6 on the south end was part of the original neighborhood plan.
You just changed it.
And when we hit, let's go back to your numbers, if we could, just for a second. You said 78 or whatever it was. Was that within the numbers we had that passed the city council in reference to the north and the south?
Right, and I outlined how that would be calculated in a gross range and a net range for the 78, and it falls between the two.
It's factoring all those, the various, the top part one, the bottom part a little different, and what that would be. All right. Anything further, or would someone like to do a motion?
Where is it?
Friendly.
I'll move to approve. Is this 2307-19?
It is.
Okay, good, we're still on it. I'll move to approve PP 2307-19 with the 18 conditions from staff.
All right. Is there a second? Second. All right, second by Lane. All right, then if we could take a vote, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? And then abstain, one abstain. All right, excellent. Then moving on to I, and is there anything additional you want to add with I? Okay. Then, okay. Rita, do you want to speak again on I? Okay. And Jay had the same comments for this one as well. So I'll open the public hearing with the comments from Rita and Jay that were addressed earlier, mentioned also reply to this. Seeing no other public comments, then I will close the public hearing for that. Any further comments on the rezone request? And if someone wants to do a motion on I, we can do that.
Is there staff comments for that, or no? Would there be different?
Recommendation is approval with 10 conditions in the packet.
Same thing. I make a motion to approve rezone request RZ 230819 with 11 conditions as stated by staff?
10.
10 conditions as stated by staff. You just told me that, duh.
All right. Is there a second? Second by Stephen. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? And then abstain. I don't believe is abstaining on this one as well, right?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Thank you
Great.
very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, going to Jay. Do you want to speak to this, Sonia?
This is another amendment, a text amendment to Chapter 24, the Land Division Ordinance. This comes on the tails of the 2017 State Act 243, which a lot of people know or refer to as the Developer's Bill of Rights. It curbed a lot of municipal regulations. One of those was when we can release permits. So it did two things. It requires us to issue early start permits for non-combustible structures, so foundation and footings, even if public improvements are done. So the idea is we don't need the water main to be done because a concrete foundation doesn't burn. So it adds conditions to allow us to issue those early start permits, and then the Developer's Bill of Rights also requires us to issue full building permits upon substantial completion of the public improvements. So in a plat like this, all of the public roads and water and sidewalk, trees, lighting, et cetera, substantial completion is defined as, I think it's listed in here, but the laying of the base course or the final binder on the roadway. So this just outlines what those changes are. This was drafted by the city attorney. Staff recommendations for approval.
All right, we do have a public hearing on this, so I'll open the public hearing right now. I don't have any comments right here on this ordinance. Seeing no one jumping up to the mic to speak, I will close the public hearing for this. Comments, questions from the commissioners?
Do we even have a choice on this?
That's a no-brainer.
It doesn't really sound like it.
Yeah.
And I motion to move ordinance 2019-029.
I'll second.
Seconded by Rich. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? All right, then that is approved. And K.
All right, turn it over to Wade Thompson.
All right.
Thanks, Sonia. There it is. So yeah, just going to really briefly talk about engaging our citizenry around our comp plan update. So basically two things I want to cover tonight. We'll talk about some principles that we utilize to come up with this framework, and then we'll talk about the individual pieces of this framework as well. So I know last time we discussed kind of the timeline, you guys gave us some direction on length of the comp plan update. So with that short timeline, we really wanted to be efficient, comprehensive, and inclusive as we engage with our public. So moving into kind of the specific pieces of our engagement process. So 4 pieces, and we'll go through each one of them individually and can certainly answer any questions that the commission might have. The first piece is our public survey, and all this stuff is included in your packet as well. So roughly, we're looking at September, October for a public survey. Then we are also envisioning 5 neighborhood/Alder district public meetings. Those will take place in October. And then we're looking at basically working with our committees to kind of integrate with them and make sure those committees get updated and provide feedback as needed and wanted. And then that'll kind of culminate in number 4. In November, we'll have a citywide public meeting, kind of in an open house format, presentation of our drafts and get additional feedback. I do want to point out, this is just, these are all proposed pieces. Obviously, as we work through this process, these things might look a little bit different and might change as well. So looking at each one of these pieces more specifically, public survey, again, this is in your packet, draft versions of our surveys. So obviously, we're looking at electronic and hard copy. Given our diverse demographic, we're looking at English and Spanish versions of our surveys. And again, given our timeline, we want to make sure that in our surveying, we're succinct but also effective. So being short but sweet is another way to put it. And then just really, when we talk about our surveys themselves, we're talking about 2 components, kind of a generalized survey, and then also a more specific survey that's probably relevant to this body, and that's essentially proposing development scenarios through pictures, and then letting our public kind of vote on which images they like best in terms of future development. As we talk about distributing the survey, we want to get a lot of feedback, a lot of people to take the survey. So we're looking at doing a citywide postcard mailer. We're also looking at advertising in our usual outlets, our newspaper, our TV, obviously our public meetings. We'll have some boots on the ground, some folks that'll get out into the neighborhoods and publicize our survey. Connect with our neighborhood associations, use our social media, and then again, really hit home with those committee meetings as well. Timeline, again, I mentioned roughly a month, mid-September to mid-October. Staff will then gather all that data, analyze it, and then put it into our comp plan update that we will present to the public in November. So that's the first piece. The second piece, as important, and this really is this idea of public meetings. Again, we're trying to cover a lot of ground in a very short amount of time. Staff put a lot of thought into really how to break out our city to be very effective in terms of understanding the unique neighborhoods. So make sure we're addressing all those unique neighborhoods, but also understanding our Alder commitments and not overloading them with having to attend 3 meetings a week, that sort of thing. So with that in mind, we came up with this map. You'll see, again, this is in your packet, but the idea is we have our Alder districts in red, and then we basically have our neighborhood public meeting zones in the colors. So District 1 kind of corresponds to, basically District 1 is 1 meeting zone. Alder Districts 2 and 3, we're envisioning combining Alder District 2 with the southern portion of District 3. Again, based on that resident demographic, we think there'll be similar topics discussed at those meetings. We have made District 3 North, which is kind of our Fish Hatch Road area, its own separate meeting zone. Again, that reflects the uniqueness of that neighborhood. And then District 4, as we all know, is a very large district. We have suburban and rural elements in that district, so we are proposing kind of a rural district meeting. That's kind of that brown or gray you're seeing. And then the blue is essentially more of the suburban type resident demographic. So essentially 2 meetings for District 4, kind of a suburban resident meeting and then a rural resident meeting. We do envision leading these meetings, staff will be involved, but we do envision leading them with partners and also hiring consultants to help with the meetings. Our format and content of the meetings is to be determined. Obviously, the meeting areas will reflect the content and the format that we want to present, so we'll put a lot of thought into that as well. And then our first step, assuming this body is okay with these ideas, we will confirm with our alders probably the next couple days in terms of meeting locations and dates as well. So the third piece here of our engagement framework is this idea of city committee meetings. And the idea here is we've made an offer to other staff, other departments, basically saying we can come to your regularly scheduled committee meetings, provide an update on the comp plan overview, or an overview on the comp plan update, and then basically kind of have a feedback session to get feedback from those committees. And again, we're looking at September to December for those committee meetings as well. And lastly, just kind of culminating all the things we just talked about. This kind of needs to be fleshed out yet. We really haven't thought much about this. We'll think about this over the next month or so. But the idea is we want to kind of take the data from all those three previous pieces, put them all together, prepare our draft. Obviously, the commission will be a big part of preparing and reviewing that draft. And then come November, have an open house format where that draft will be presented for public feedback. And then we'll start talking about the adoption process. So again, quick and dirty on public engagement. Again, I do want to point out, a short timeline, but with the pieces that we talked about, we really think it's a good process. It's a good, thorough, succinct, inclusive process. So.
All right, I do have two public comments. First from Jay Hockmuth in Fitchburg, registering in support of the above matter and commenting that an outreach survey is great. And also Rita Hendricks from Fitchburg, registering in support of the survey and comment, excellent job on questionnaire and working to keep the comp plan on target. If you could hand those to Lisa for me. One other thing I'll mention too, you're talking about the neighborhood meetings and dividing it up into like 5 different groups. Anyone can go to any meeting. Just because you live in one area doesn't mean you can only go to that meeting. If there's another time that works better or something else, if you want to go to any, you can go to any of them. You can go to all of them if you want. If you really want to go to meetings, you can do that. But I think that's a key piece is you're welcome to come to any of those. They're all public meetings. Other thoughts, comments?
Yeah, just a question. So Wade, within this framework, some of the things that we've talked about that maybe changes that we want to look at, like the net versus gross calculation, the possibility of some special study areas, where does that fit into this process? When do we?
Yeah, again, I think the public meetings will probably be more reflective of specific resident feedback in terms of some of the more technical issues that this body deals with. Sonia, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but maybe that's more of a plan commission workshop type setup.
I agree, and as Wade mentioned, the content and format of all those public meetings is to be determined, and we might, the public survey might run a little bit in advance of when the meetings are actually held, so we can sort of take some of the feedback that we're starting to gather from the online survey and use that to help us inform questions to ask or how to facilitate those neighborhood meetings. I think some of those technical discussions at Plan Commission would be appropriate as we bring drafts forward for review here at the Plan Commission level.
Okay, but some of them might be helpful
Yeah.
early too to kind of color where those drafts may end up too. So this is really kind of you're laying out a timeline, Wade, for the public input. And for the input then from members of council or from Plan Commission.
Yep.
Is there another kind of agenda for what we're going to be addressing at each of our meetings throughout this process?
It's a work in progress, but we have some ideas as far as, 2 upcoming meetings, September 17th and the September 25th Committee of the Whole. We have a goal to get a few chapters, draft chapters of the plan in front of you for review, so we could, based on what the chapter is, pull out specific policies for discussion.
And to your point, that's really where, the third bullet point there, format and content TBD. And that's where, once we get this, if this gets approved, then I think we really start thinking about, what do those meetings look like? How do we address issues from various bodies and residents? So, yep.
Okay. Thanks.
The first surveys, the public survey, the September, October, those are going to be online?
Yep, exactly.
One of the things that I like.
Through the Fitchburg city website?
Yep, so
or through
we
another-
contracted with a company that does this throughout the country. They provide survey formats for cities. Polco is the name of that company. So we're working with them to kind of get it formatted. But yeah, it'll be embedded on our website. And there'll probably be a direct link to it as well on the internet. So we'll make it very, very accessible.
And how will we let the citizens know that they gotta do it.
Yeah, so we're gonna send out a postcard mailer.
So that's gonna precede everything?
Yeah, so the
Okay.
idea is everything
good
we
then.
just talked about, that'll be on a postcard to, I think, probably every household. That's our goal. It'll lay out, where the survey is, when it's open, how they can access it. It'll lay out the meeting that's relevant to their neighborhood, in addition to the other meetings. So yeah, it'll lay all that stuff out, yep.
Have you guys done that before?
Excuse me?
Has the city done something like this before?
I think we did this roughly, 10 years ago with our first comp plan, maybe not to this integrated level, but we did do a citywide survey and noticing, yep.
It was very similar to this. It was just, it wasn't I don't think it was an online.
Yep,
I
probably.
don't remember exactly how we collected it, but the format was similar.
Yeah, one thing I like about the company we're using for the online survey is they do track kind of where people are answering from, and so if someone gets it upon themselves, I'm gonna fill this out 100 times, that's gonna show up, and so someone can't skew the results by doing that. I don't know who has that amount of time, but people do a lot of things that I don't understand.
That's what I was going, I didn't know if so is there a specific take rate, if you will, that would allow us to move forward, or if you don't get enough?
You mean like scientifically valid kind of stuff, like numbers?
I don't want to say that.
Yeah.
But is there a specific,
We can look into that. I don't think this is just one piece of the puzzle.
Sure.
A survey is one piece of many pieces we'll analyze to come up with a draft. So I don't think we're overly concerned with statistical significance, but just that idea of, we'll look into it and see what we can come up with.
Steve?
So here you have the format of electronic and hard copy. So are there any hard copy surveys being sent out, or it's just the postcard to drive people to the online survey?
I think probably what we'll do is just have hard copies available and let people know they're available. I don't envision mailing out hard
Like at City
copies.
Hall or something, if you're...
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. What's that?
Yeah,
Yeah, and certainly if people want stacks of copies, we can probably figure out a way to do that, yep.
Tom, do you have a question?
I guess I want you guys to tell me what you think too, but I was at a city meeting and the more I thought about this, I just think in number 2 where it's neighborhoods, that number 2 bullet. Wayne, I don't know, I guess I'm thinking for the future and this 10-year plan, but I still think we should maybe, we don't have to send them postcards to go too far, but I think the town of Madison should be noted.
Yeah, good point. And I know we did discuss that,
Just,
and I
it
think,
should be noted, that's
Yeah.
all I'm trying to say.
agreed.
It's got to be noted
Yep.
in there.
Great point.
Other,
Are they even considered a district yet?
Excuse me?
Are they, that,
I don't know what's gonna happen with them being integrated, incorporated. It's kind of beyond our knowledge right now, yep.
that'll be about the same time we do redistricting, so that'll just be incorporated with that, I would guess.
sure.
More feedback, comments, concerns? I don't know that you're looking for anything to be approved besides just some more general feedback, but if there's something that you want approved, we can do that.
Yeah, no official actions required. If you want to signal support, you could pass a motion, but it's not required.
All right. I think in general, I've heard positive things and we're on the right track, so we don't need to pass anything additional. So if there's anything else you need, we can do that. Otherwise, we can keep
No, again,
going.
just wanted to kind of inform you guys what we're up to, and certainly if there's any, major revisions or edits that we need to be thinking about, but it sounds like the commission is comfortable with stuff as you identified it, so.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thanks for all your work. All right, then moving forward, we have report from departments. Do you want me to talk about this? Do you want to talk about? All right, so I know at the end of last meeting, it was just kind of brought up about, hey, do people have any interest in starting plan commission meetings at 6 o'clock instead of 7? It did seem like there was some interest. Want to kind of formally ask that. I know, Lane was gone at the end of last meeting. See if there's any concerns or questions. I know next month we're planning on starting at 6 anyway to do that joint meeting first, but this would really be a permanent change. To me, it wouldn't be a change for a few months or anything like that. It's permanently starting a little earlier, hopefully ending earlier as well. So I wanted to open that up and just make sure that people are okay with that, or if they have any big concerns. Rich?
I prefer 7, but I would do 6:30. 6 o'clock is iffy, being able to make it here sometimes. So I see a compromise maybe.
I'd agree with Rich.
Okay. Anyone else?
6:30 is fine with me.
6:30, okay. I mean,
The only
that's-
reason I even threw that on the table, due to the fact that if we start a little earlier, you get done a little earlier, some of these meetings are long. I don't mean to talk against Rich, I'm not, but I'm just.
No, I
if you
understand.
Go earlier, get done a little earlier, that was my only thought.
And we're getting to that age where we go to bed by 9:30, right?
I know, but
What do you mean that age? I do the same thing.
Guilty.
No,
So
it
it
doesn't-
sounds like
you know,
at least 6:30 maybe. I go from there. Now, next month is still gonna be 6 o'clock because of the joint meeting with CETA, I believe. But then going forward, we'll look to start at 6:30. So, all right. Anything else you need on that?
Nope.
All right. Looks like some announcements. Really talking about that joint meeting on September 17th at 6 o'clock. We will do a joint meeting with CETA to start off. Vanderwall Associates is giving a presentation on North Fishhatcher Road Corridor Plan. And then Plan Commission will start at 7 or essentially immediately after the joint meeting with Vanderwall. I guess the one question I have with that, so if the Vanderwall meeting for some reason takes 30 minutes, would we start plan right away, or is it saying 7 o'clock or later?
I would read it to say that we wouldn't be able to start until 7 o'clock, the earliest noted on the agenda. So we could bump that out up to 6:45 or 6:30, but I didn't have an estimation, so 7, I just left it.
I'd be surprised if it was less than 45 minutes anyway, but, okay,
Discussion.
yeah. All right, and there's a lot of people on CETA as well. Hopefully they can make it. All right, any other announcements at all?
I'll just note, in the last few months, one of the staff positions here for the city, the sustainability specialist, was moved from the Public Works Department into the Planning Department. So we have 4 full-time staff between Lisa Wade, myself, and the new sustainability specialist, and we have hired for that position. It's been vacant since March, so I'll just announce next Monday, we'll have Phil Groupie starting. He's a resident of the area for many years, has a master's degree in environment and resources with a certificate in energy analysis and policy, and he also has a background in sustainability, engagement, and environmental education. So looking forward to having him on board, and sounds like a really qualified and capable addition to our staff.
What was his position again? The one that got moved here?
Sustainability specialist.
Quick overview of what that
Yep.
guy does.
So they primarily, as far as staff committees, they're gonna provide staff support to the Bicycle Committee and also support to the RCC, which is the Resource Conservation Commission. They'll work on things like our solar panels, energy, efficiency for city facilities, renewable energy, and then multiple other buckets. You can think about water conservation.
Climate change?
What's that?
Will they work on climate change?
Exactly, those types of things.
And that was under Parks previously?
It was under Public Works.
Public Works?
Yep.
Is there any reason for moving it to a plan or one or the other? Is one beneficial to the other? Or?
Yeah, it's a position that can really easily float between the two, so it will continue to be interdepartmental. But the idea, I believe, was to help facilitate maybe a little bit more of a systematic overview of those types of issues, and then also help with longer range planning on issues like climate change or sustainable transportation, et cetera.
Stormwater?
Yep.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Before we adjourn, because I'm sure that's where you're heading with this, I just have 2 things that I think it's like new business in my mind that I want to ask. So you had brought up a good point when we were looking at that design review about if there's any solar power. We have that park green space fee, basically, if you don't include it. Is that a plan, comp plan type of thing that we should include if we wanted to have something similar for renewable energy? Because that kind of got me thinking about why don't we, kind of push new development into that, and if not, then there should be something to offset not doing renewable.
There are policies that you could adopt as part of the plan that would encourage that. I think a lot of the more detailed ordinance requirements or specific policies might come from something a little bit more detailed, say a sustainability plan or an energy plan or an ordinance, but the comp plan could be an appropriate place for those big picture policies. And then, for example, Wade talked about committee meetings. So the Resource Conservation Commission is going to have a crack at looking at the comprehensive plan, and they'll think a little bit about how we could incorporate sustainability policies into the plan.
And one other comment I'll have on that is that one of the things that we're going to be doing is putting together some guidelines on the use of TIF money. And it's not necessarily related to this body, but I think one of the things we'll talk about on the council anyway is something that Middleton does, where if a project gets TIF, that they incentivize or require at least some solar as part of that on those projects. If there isn't, then why is that? But they really encourage solar on especially TIF projects as kind of a requirement for getting that TIF money. So that's something that I think we'll talk about.
I had never thought of it until you just asked them that question. I'm thinking, well, if we've got this pretty steep fee for not having green space or park space, why wouldn't we put the same onus in terms of renewable energy when we're all thinking it? Rainwater runoff and everything else. Second one was, so a lot of discussion between really looking at the timeline for the comp plan amendment or the comp plan revision and the O'Briens and Edgewater. I think the discussion, especially at city council, was that's not really going to be part of this because it's such an ongoing process. What do either we or city council, I want to make sure that that doesn't just sit, because to Tom's point is let the market drive it. Well, here's something that we would never plan for that to ever be developed because it's such a not what you would want to develop, except for this one unique body that would be an excellent asset. So what needs to happen between us, city council, concerned citizen, to move that forward?
Yeah, it's a complicated issue. I think one of the things that we've talked about is putting in the comp plan an opportunity to do a major comp plan amendment possibly within those 10 years. Right now, that's not something that's allowed, and you just minor amendments once a year. But I think one of the things we'll talk about is, could we do a major comp plan amendment maybe every 3 years or something like that, so that so if those opportunities do kind of come up, we go, oh, we need to look into this more, and this is something that we don't want to have to wait 8 or 9 years to implement. Is there some mechanism for that without getting into specific projects, because it's a little bit stickier, but there are things that come up, and there will continue to be things that come up, and that there might be projects that make a lot of sense for properties, and how can we work with those?
Okay. I want to make sure that that just isn't, because we didn't want to extend the timeline of the comp plan, sorry, O'Briens. I mean, that doesn't make sense, and I wanted to make sure that there's some kind of action or traction from that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any other announcements at all? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay? All right. So we are adjourned. Thank you.